Ex-wife and mistress team up, gather evidence, and destroy the cheating millionaire husband. Prepare to witness a tale of glamour, deceit, and unexpected solidarity that will make your heart race and your jaw drop. In this riveting story, a seemingly perfect millionaire, Leonard Harrington, appears to have it all: opulent mansions, luxury cars, and the kind of swagger only the ultra-wealthy can exude. But beneath the sparkling veneer lies a web of secrets, an explosive affair, and two scorned women who refuse to remain victims. Strap yourself in as his wife and mistress unite, determined to unmask the lies, gather damning evidence, and orchestrate his ultimate downfall. Keep watching. This story's twists will leave you breathless. Leonard Harrington was the kind of man who never went unnoticed in a room. Standing a little over 6 feet tall with a meticulous haircut and a collection of tailored suits that draped his athletic frame perfectly, he radiated an air of old money. Born into a wealthy family that boasted board positions at Morgan Stanley, Leonard seemed destined for prosperity. But the wealth he inherited was only part of his success story. Armed with charisma, charm, and cunning intelligence, he had built a small empire of investments from real estate to luxury spa resorts. Every piece of his carefully curated life sparkled with opulence. His wife, Beatrice Harrington, came from a more modest background. Though extremely intelligent and poised, she hadn't been raised among the wealthy elite. She was a talented artist, known for painting mesmerizing landscapes that whispered of hidden emotions. She had been captivated by Leonard from the moment she laid eyes on him at a gallery event, seduced by his confidence and exotic promises of a life beyond her wildest dreams. Over the years, Beatrice had grown accustomed to fancy dinners at the Waldorf Astoria, lavish parties in private yachts, and extended stays in London penthouses. It was a fairy tale, or so it seemed. Beneath the sparkle and polite smiles, Beatrice often felt like a gilded bird in a cage. She tried to dismiss these feelings as mere jitters. After all, she loved painting in her private studio, funded entirely by Leonard's generosity. She had friends in high places, invitations to exclusive galas, and even philanthropic committees clamoring for her name. Who was she to complain about the pangs of emptiness gnawing at her heart? Unbeknownst to Beatrice, Leonard was nursing a secret. He had a mistress named Dahlia Pierce, a marketing executive who possessed the kind of wit and ambition that most men found irresistible. Dahlia had grown tired of fleeting encounters and increasingly hazy promises that Leonard would figure out the right time to reveal their affair. She came from a middle-class family, had clawed her way into her position, and believed fervently in self-reliance. Part of Dahlia knew this dalliance with a married man was a dangerous game, ethically precarious and emotionally volatile, yet she couldn't disentangle herself from the intoxicating rush of Leonard's attentions. Night after night, Dahlia found herself in 5-star suites or chauffeur-driven rides that Leonard arranged, each dripping with stolen moments of passion. He had promised her the world, whispering sweet nothings about leaving his wife eventually, building a different life together. The hush money was good, the gifts were better, and the fleeting hopes of a future with him felt like a shot of adrenaline directly to her heart. She told herself she was in control until she realized just how heavily the guilt weighed on her. And in that guilt, the seeds of discontent began to sprout. Fate often has a peculiar way of bringing people together. The unholy alliance that would form between Beatrice and Dahlia started with an unexpected encounter in the corridor of one of Leonard's luxury hotels. Beatrice, scheduled to oversee the art direction for the hotel's grand reopening, arrived unannounced one afternoon. Dahlia, meeting with the head of marketing for that same project, stepped out of her meeting just as Beatrice was stepping in. They locked eyes for a moment, each struck by an odd sense of familiarity, though they had never formally met. A spark of curiosity ignited in Dahlia, and a pang of suspicious clarity pulsed in Beatrice. They exchanged polite smiles, and that was that. But that single moment, two women crossing paths amidst the glitter of Leonard's grand ambitions, would soon set a chain of events in motion, unlike anything either had anticipated. Beatrice, perceptive as ever, noticed hints of Dahlia's perfume lingering in the hallway. A floral bouquet that was undeniably feminine and alluring, the kind that doesn't fade quickly. It triggered a memory of a different day, a different place, when Leonard returned from a business meeting wearing the very same scent. A wave of anxiety washed over her. She brushed it off, convincing herself it was a coincidence. After all, how many high-powered businesswomen might wear the same fragrance? Yet, the smell haunted her that night at dinner. She found herself watching Leonard more closely, picking up on the subtle signals that hinted at secrets. He was a touch more restless than usual, his phone constantly buzzing with incoming notifications, and he excused himself more frequently than normal. She observed the tension tightening his jaw. Though not yet certain, a wisp of suspicion began to unfurl in her mind. For Dahlia, meeting Beatrice face to face delivered a jolt of stark, sobering truth. The wife was no phantom figure locked away in some gilded tower. She was beautiful, poised, and more real than Dahlia had ever allowed herself to imagine. The image of Beatrice's gentle smile and inquisitive eyes followed Dahlia home that night. As she played with the keychain Leonard had gifted her, shaped like a delicate silver heart, something inside her shifted. She had grown tired of playing second fiddle, but the guilt of hurting another woman and possibly destroying a family pressed down on her with renewed urgency. Little did either woman know that the tenuous threads of suspicion and guilt that bound them were about to tighten dramatically. The tapestry of Leonard's life, a tapestry carefully woven from half-truths and deceptions, was about to unravel in a most unexpected manner. The lush Harrington estate was a place of serene beauty on the outside. Vast lawns rolled out like green carpets on which peacocks sometimes strutted, a testament to Leonard's taste for the exquisite. A cobblestone driveway led to a Victorian-style mansion with tall columns and grand windows. The interior, filled with priceless art and antiques, offered a labyrinth of corridors that led to hidden reading nooks and secret drawers. It was in one of these discreet corners, a small side room used for storage, that Beatrice made her first major discovery. On an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, she had been searching for an old sketchbook. Leonard was out for a business meeting, presumably at one of his up-and-coming real estate projects. Beatrice rummaged through boxes, unearthing memories of old photographs, personal letters, and ticket stubs from lavish European vacations. Hidden underneath a stack of press clippings about Leonard was a small black notebook. She opened it out of curiosity. What she found inside made her heart pound in her chest. The notebook contained notes that seemed to detail transactions and personal appointments. Several entries mentioned Dahlia's name. At first, the scribbles appeared coded time slots, strange abbreviations, references to lunch or dinner at discreet restaurants. The repetition of Dahlia's name, combined with booking confirmations for upscale hotels, left no room for confusion. Leonard had taken scrupulous care to record his clandestine trysts, or at least some details of them. Beatrice felt her stomach lurch. A coldness swept over her body as the shocking reality settled in. Leonard was having an affair. She fought back tears, resisting the urge to scream and tear the place apart. For a fleeting moment, she thought she might burn the notebook, pretend she had never seen it. The idea of confronting Leonard seemed terrifying, yet the seeds of righteous fury had already taken root. She remembered the fleeting glance with Dahlia in the hotel corridor, the lingering perfume, the subtle tension in Leonard's demeanor. Piece by piece, the puzzle was falling into place. And with each piece, her heartbreak found a new companion, anger. Meanwhile, Dahlia was increasingly unsettled by Leonard's shifting attitudes. Though she had never felt truly secure in their relationship, she noticed he was growing more possessive while also distancing himself at the strangest times. One moment, he showered her with affection, exquisite jewelry, spontaneous getaways, hush-hush dinners, and the next he acted cold and dismissive. Dahlia suspected something more than just the usual guilt weighed on him. She also noticed that whenever she tried to discuss their future, his eyes grew distant. The excuses piled up. I have to handle some urgent family business, or the time isn't right just yet. More and more, she caught glimpses of the manipulator beneath the polished exterior. Then came the day she saw him with another woman at a restaurant near her workplace. A different woman, neither Beatrice nor Dahlia. Confused, Dahlia hurried away before Leonard spotted her, but the sight tore at her. He had his arms around this stranger, whispering intimately in her ear. Was Leonard cheating on Dahlia as well? The notion sounded absurd at first, but given he was already cheating on Beatrice with Dahlia, it wasn't impossible. How far did his deception go? Haunted by the possibility, Dahlia contemplated confronting him, but she worried he would turn the tables, maybe even threaten to cut her off financially or ruin her reputation at the marketing firm. He had that kind of power. Restlessness consumed her nights. She would stare at the digital clock in her bedroom while the city lights flickered beyond her curtains, pondering how she'd allowed herself to spiral into such a predicament. An opportunity for truth arrived in the form of a mutual acquaintance. Victoria Rains was a socialite known for her charity events, a woman who seemed to know everyone's secrets. Leonard had once called her the ultimate connector. Dahlia, feeling desperate for answers, confided in Victoria, who in turn offered cryptic tidbits about Leonard's colourful history of affairs, hush money, and cover-ups. He's done this before, Victoria hinted over cappuccinos at a downtown cafe. I can't prove it, but watch your back. He has a particular skill for twisting people's loyalty to protect himself. Disturbed by what she heard, Dahlia felt an undercurrent of betrayal flooding her senses. Her moral dilemma turned suffocating. She despised being the other woman, but she now realized she might be just another pawn in Leonard's grand game. She wanted out preferably without her world crashing down. But how? As fate would have it, the perfect storm began to brew when Beatrice called Dahlia directly one evening. Until that moment, they had never properly spoken outside that brief hallway glance. The phone call startled Dahlia, who hesitated before answering. Beatrice's voice was steady, subdued, yet carrying an unmistakable intensity. Dahlia, she said, I want to talk to you about Leonard. You and I both know what's going on. There was no accusation in her tone, just a calm determination. Dahlia's heart pounded. She expected rage, screaming, maybe even threats. But Beatrice was different, collected, direct, almost eerily calm. The emotional charge of the moment hung in the silence that followed. Dahlia swallowed hard. How did you get my number? Dahlia asked, her voice trembling. That doesn't matter, Beatrice replied. I'm not calling you to fight. I want the truth, and I suspect you do too. They agreed to meet at a discreet cafe in a quieter part of town, and so two women, both bound by heartbreak, betrayal, and a desire for answers, prepared to step into uncharted territory. Neither knew if they could trust the other, but something told them they had no choice. In that moment, Leonard was entirely unaware of the seismic shift about to occur in his carefully orchestrated life. While he indulged in illusions of control, his wife and his mistress were about to cross the line from rivals to unlikely allies. And the catalyst for that transformation was a potent mixture of pain, fury, and the shared goal of unveiling the truth. The dimly lit corner of the cafe provided just enough privacy for secret confessions. Beatrice arrived first, cloaked in a simple black coat, her hair pulled back in a neat chignon. She'd chosen a table by the window where the glow of streetlights gave the illusion of safety against the darkness of the night outside. She felt a swirl of emotions: fear, anticipation, indignation, knowing she was moments away from confronting the woman who had been sleeping with her husband. When Dahlia walked in, Beatrice almost had to catch her breath. Dahlia was more stunning up close than Beatrice had expected, exuding an air of confident elegance in her tailored blazer and pencil skirt. She approached the table with uncertain steps, her eyes darting around to gauge any potential threat. "Beatrice," Dahlia said, voice soft but resonant. "Thank you for coming," Beatrice replied, gesturing for her to sit. They ordered drinks. Beatrice settled for chamomile tea, something gentle to calm her nerves, while Dahlia ordered a double espresso, hoping the caffeine would shore up her courage. The silence between them hummed with tension and unspoken questions. "So, you said we both know what's going on," Dahlia began, swirling the espresso in its small cup. "You want me to confirm?" Beatrice nodded slowly. "I found a notebook. It had your name, repeated many times with details that, well, they suggest you and Leonard have been seeing each other for quite some time." Guilt crashed over Dahlia like a wave. She felt exposed, cornered, but also strangely relieved. There was no more hiding from the wife. The facade was gone, replaced by a harsh clarity. "Yes," she admitted at last, voice catching. "I'm not proud of it. Leonard made promises, said he'd leave you, that he wasn't in love anymore, that he was trapped in a marriage of convenience. I know it's not an excuse." She paused, forcing herself to meet Beatrice's steady gaze. "I need you to know I never intended to destroy your marriage. I truly believed him." Beatrice's lips tightened, but her voice remained measured. "I'm not here to judge you. Leonard is the one who made vows to me. But there is something you should know. This might be bigger than both of us." She hesitated, lowering her voice. "He's not just having an affair with you." Dahlia's eyes widened. "You mean that woman at the restaurant?" Beatrice raised an eyebrow. "Another woman?" "I was referring to some suspicious records I found, not just your name, but possibly others." "But you're saying you actually saw him with someone else?" Dahlia nodded, her hand shaking slightly as she set down her espresso cup. "He was so intimate with her, I wasn't sure what to think. But if what you're saying is true, we're both just part of a bigger pattern." A heavy silence descended as they both processed the scale of Leonard's betrayal. For Beatrice, it was more than heartbreak. It felt like an insult to the life she'd built, the trust she'd offered. For Dahlia, it was a savage blow to her pride and sense of self-worth. "What do you plan to do?" Dahlia asked, finally breaking the silence. Beatrice inhaled deeply. She thought of her wedding day, how Leonard had whisked her off to Venice on a private jet for their honeymoon, how he had knelt in street, Mark Square, to proclaim eternal devotion. Now, those memories tasted bitter. "I want evidence, legal, irrefutable proof that can protect me and expose him for the liar he is. Possibly, to divorce him in a way that ensures he can't slip away unscathed." Dahlia felt a surprising surge of empathy for Beatrice's resolve. She reached out, tentatively placing her hand over Beatrice's. "I can help. I know some of his secrets, how he arranges meetings, where he hides his personal documents. But let's be clear, this won't be easy. He's careful, powerful, and manipulative." A flicker of gratitude touched Beatrice's eyes. She squeezed Dahlia's hand gently. "We can do this if we work together. But we have to be smart. Step by step." Dahlia nodded. She recalled what Victoria Rains had said about Leonard's ability to twist loyalty. They would have to be methodical, gather real proof, and anticipate his counter moves. More than anything, Dahlia wanted closure and a chance to restore her dignity, even if it meant helping the wife "I'm in," she said, voice firm. "What's our first move?" They talked for what felt like hours, mapping out a preliminary plan. Dahlia would share the contact details of the private suite Leonard frequently reserved, along with login credentials to certain booking apps he had asked her to use for them. Beatrice would speak with her family lawyer discreetly, ensuring that any evidence they gathered could be used in court, should it come to that. As they finally parted ways, there was a sense of unexpected camaraderie. They were two women scorned, forging an alliance born of betrayal and heartbreak. Each carried the weight of her own regrets. Yet, somehow, in that quiet corner of the cafe, they found the smallest glimmer of hope that justice, real justice, could be served. Outside, the night air felt crisper. Dahlia pulled her coat closer around her shoulders. Beatrice offered a small, wry smile. "I never thought I'd be saying this, but thank you for your honesty." Dahlia nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "We're in this together, for better or worse." The irony of that phrase did not escape them. For better or worse was something Leonard had promised Beatrice in front of all their friends and family. And now, ironically, it was a vow binding his wife and mistress to each other. Their separate cars departed from the lonely street, leaving behind the faint glow of the cafe's window. Neither woman fully understood the magnitude of the battle they were about to wage, but both felt an unspoken truth. They were done being victims in Leonard Harrington's twisted game. From here on out, they would be the architects of his downfall. In the days that followed their clandestine meeting, Beatrice and Dahlia embarked on a delicate dance of information gathering. They communicated through burner phones, disposable devices procured by Dahlia, who insisted they leave no digital trace that could be tied back to either of them. Trust was still precarious, though they had joined forces. Each woman carried her own apprehensions about fully letting the other in. The more they uncovered about Leonard, the more labyrinthine his life appeared. He had perfected the art of compartmentalizing his relationships. In emails and text messages, he used code words for rendezvous and business dealings alike, blurring the lines so thoroughly that any casual observer might never suspect foul play. However, Dahlia's intimate knowledge of these codes, combined with the leads in Leonard's black notebook, gave them a roadmap of leads to follow. Beatrice's first move was to consult a divorce attorney, a discreet professional named Martina Thorne, rumored to have handled high-profile cases involving top executives and celebrities. Martina had a reputation for protecting her clients' interests with ferocity. During their initial meeting, Beatrice laid out some of the suspicious financial documents she had found, cryptic mentions of offshore accounts and funneling money to unregistered companies. Martina's eyes glinted with keen interest as she flipped through the pages. "This is more than infidelity," Martina said, her tone measured. "If these documents are real, your husband could be facing serious legal trouble. Alimony and settlement negotiations might just be the tip of the iceberg." Beatrice's heart pounded as she recognized the magnitude of her revelations. She had only expected to prove Leonard's extramarital affair, but it seemed she might have stumbled upon evidence of potential financial crimes. Martina advised her to stay calm, continue collecting evidence, and avoid tipping Leonard off prematurely. This conversation left Beatrice both empowered and terrified. She wasn't just contending with a cheating spouse. She might be grappling with a man whose secrets could shake the foundations of his entire empire. Meanwhile, Dahlia leveraged her inside knowledge of Leonard's world. She reached out to certain associates, people in Leonard's orbit, who owed her favors or appreciated her professionalism enough to trust her with subtle bits of information. Over coffee breaks and casual after-work drinks, she gleaned small but critical pieces of intel, rumored shell companies linked to Leonard's name, hush money paid to a former employee, and mounting speculation that he was being investigated by a financial watchdog group. Yet, Dahlia's advantage came with risk. If Leonard discovered her inquiries, he might retaliate by blacklisting her within the industry or worse. With each question she asked, she walked a perilous tightrope, trying not to draw unwanted attention. She often felt a pang of anxiety gnawing at her chest, wondering if she had gone too far down a path from which there was no return. Late one evening, Beatrice and Dahlia convened via a secure call on their burner phones. They swapped updates. Dahlia rattled off the rumors she'd confirmed, while Beatrice disclosed her meeting with Martina. As they pieced their information together like a jigsaw puzzle, the full picture began to emerge. Leonard Harrington wasn't just cheating on his wife, he was playing a high-stakes game with fraudulent shell companies, misappropriated funds, and hush money to keep it all under wraps. For all we know, there could be more women, more payoffs. Beatrice speculated, a mixture of sorrow and anger coloring her voice. It's like he's built this entire web of lies to inflate his reputation and keep everyone around him controlled. Dahlia was silent for a moment, the gravity of the situation pressing down on her. I had no idea I was dealing with someone who might be a criminal, not just a cheater, she confessed. We have to be sure we use this information correctly. If we just confront him head-on, he'll deny everything and could threaten both of us. That's why we need more evidence, Beatrice replied resolutely. Martina said it needs to be airtight. And if there really is a formal investigation brewing, we need proof to either join it or leverage it to protect ourselves. In the midst of this surreptitious operation, Leonard remained oblivious. He spent his days at board meetings, dinners with potential investors, and photo ops that further showcased his philanthropic side, a charity gala here, a scholarship fund there. Smiling for the cameras, he perpetuated the myth of a perfect family man, an upstanding citizen of the high society circle. Behind that practiced grin, though, he sensed a shift in Beatrice's demeanor. She was quieter, more reserved. Now and then, he caught her studying him with a careful, almost calculating stare. Whenever he asked if something was bothering her, she waved off his concerns with a dismissive shake of her head, masking her intent beneath a veneer of polite marital discourse. One evening, Leonard decided to surprise Beatrice with an ornate bouquet of roses, an unusually grand gesture. He handed them to her as she was heading to her art studio. "You've been preoccupied lately," he said, a touch of concern woven into his tone. "Something on your mind?" Beatrice forced a warm smile. "I've been busy, that's all," she replied, inhaling the sweet fragrance of the blooms. "Thank you for these." Her facade was convincing enough that Leonard didn't press the issue, but her heart pounded at the nearness of his presence, at how she was pulling the wool over the eyes of a man she once worshipped. She felt a flicker of triumph, overshadowed by a nagging guilt, but then she reminded herself that Leonard's own deceptions had forced her into this role. As the days ticked on, the two women discovered deeper threads of Leonard's deception. A hidden safe in his private office, secret investments under aliases, unaccounted for funds streaming between different accounts. Each new piece of information fueled their determination to bring him down. Yet, the real challenge lay ahead. They needed undeniable, incontrovertible proof, physical evidence of these transactions, recordings or messages that could withstand legal scrutiny. And they needed to secure it all before Leonard even suspected their alliance. Neither woman had anticipated that their partnership would become something more than a necessary inconvenience. Yet, a fragile sense of mutual respect began to bloom. They found in each other a strange comfort, an empathy that no one else in their circles could fully offer, because no one else knew the betrayal so intimately from both sides. Their bond was forged in hardship, and each day they inched closer to delivering a reckoning that Leonard Harrington would never see coming. The catalyst for the next phase of their plan arrived unexpectedly when Dahlia received a tip from one of her closest colleagues. He mentioned, almost in passing, that Leonard was planning a business retreat with potential investors at a remote luxury chalet. The property, dubbed Snow Peak Haven, was rumored to be owned by one of Leonard's shell companies. Dahlia sensed this retreat would be more than just a business meeting. In Leonard's world, it might serve as a clandestine hub for forging deals beyond the scrutiny of corporate boards. When Dahlia relayed this tip to Beatrice, the possibilities practically crackled through the phone line. They reasoned that if Leonard used the chalet for off-the-record transactions, it might hold a treasure trove of incriminating documents and digital footprints. This was exactly the type of place they needed to infiltrate. The risk was enormous, but so was the potential reward. "Are you up for it?" Dahlia asked cautiously. Beatrice's voice held a steely determination. "If it means nailing him to the wall, absolutely." They devised a bold strategy. Dahlia would find a pretext to join Leonard at the retreat as his assistant, feigning that her marketing expertise could impress the investors. Meanwhile, Beatrice would discreetly drive up after they'd arrived, using Dahlia's intel to slip into the chalet undetected. A labyrinth of challenges stood in their way: security staff, potential cameras, and the very real possibility of Leonard catching them. But the prospect of discovering critical evidence was too tempting to ignore. In the days leading up to the retreat, Dahlia feigned enthusiasm when Leonard mentioned he'd be traveling for a few days of business. She carefully planted seeds, emphasizing how her marketing insights could add value, how prospective investors might be swayed by a polished presentation. Leonard, eager to secure the deals, acquiesced, inviting her along. Beatrice, on her end, prepared a separate cover story for her own absence, telling Leonard she'd be visiting an old friend in the countryside for an art retreat. When the appointed day arrived, Dahlia boarded Leonard's private jet with a forced smile. The other attendees, two potential investors named Gilbert and Stone, plus a personal assistant to one of the investors, made polite conversation en route. Leonard relished his role as gracious host, topping off wine glasses and boasting about his long-term vision for a diversified portfolio. Dahlia played the supportive partner, taking mental notes of every subtlety, from the investors' demands to the hush-hush references to certain questionable projects. Snow Peak Haven was nestled among towering pine trees and rolling snow-capped hills. Its rustic facade belied the state-of-the-art amenities within. As they arrived, Dahlia's heart thumped. She was about to step onto the stage of their most daring act yet. Leonard gave Dahlia a quick tour, highlighting amenities like a private hot tub deck, high-end kitchen, and an expansive study adorned with antique books. "I'll need you to help prepare the conference materials," he said, gesturing to the study. "We'll meet the investors there tomorrow morning. Tonight, let's just unwind." Meanwhile, far down the winding roads, Beatrice drove a rented SUV with tinted windows. Snow flurries danced across her windshield as she navigated hairpin turns leading up the mountain. She wore simple, dark clothing, nothing that stood out. Adrenaline mingled with dread in her bloodstream. This was it. The moment she'd step into the lion's den, risking everything for the evidence that could finally free her from Leonard's manipulative grasp. Arriving under the cloak of dusk, Beatrice parked the SUV behind a cluster of pines, away from prying eyes. Using a small flashlight, she scanned the perimeter of the chalet, her breath condensing in the crisp air. Dahlia had texted her a rough sketch of the layout, including a back entrance that was rarely used. It led to a storage area and a set of stairs connecting to the main hallway. If all went as planned, Beatrice could slip in unnoticed, while Dahlia kept Leonard occupied. Back inside the chalet, Dahlia approached Leonard, who was sipping an aged scotch by a stone fireplace. She feigned a headache, claiming she needed a moment to rest before dinner. "I'll be fresh by tomorrow," she assured him. "Might just lie down for a bit." Leonard, half absorbed in reviewing some papers, waved her off. "Sure, do what you need. We can join the others for a late dinner." Moments later, Dahlia quietly unlocked the back door, her heart hammering in her chest. Then she made her way to her suite, waiting for the signal that Beatrice had arrived. Her phone vibrated softly, a single text from Beatrice here. Dahlia slipped into the hallway, checking for any staff. Most of them were likely busy setting up for dinner or assisting the investors. She found Beatrice crouched by a shadowy corner near the stairs. Their eyes met, each filled with urgency and resolve. "This way," Dahlia whispered. "He's in the living room, drinking." They navigated the corridor, careful to muffle their footsteps on the wooden floor. Dahlia led Beatrice to the study, a sprawling room lined with old books and leather-bound folders. A massive wooden desk occupied the far end, a sleek laptop perched on top. The desk drawers and nearby cabinets called out to them like a siren song of secret knowledge. The clock was ticking. Leonard could wander in at any moment. Together, they searched methodically. Dahlia flipped through a stack of files, labeled with cryptic codes she recognized as project codenames. Beatrice navigated the laptop, entering the passwords Dahlia had gleaned from conversations with Leonard. Finally, they accessed a folder named Accounts, Priority. Inside were spreadsheets peppered with suspicious transactions, references to offshore entities, and multiple lines of direct payments disguised as consulting fees. Each line represented potential evidence not only of Leonard's financial misconduct, but also hush payments that might link back to personal affairs. "Yes," Beatrice hissed under her breath. She inserted a flash drive into the laptop, initiating a quick copy of the damning files. Meanwhile, Dahlia found a locked drawer. She rifled through Leonard's desk until she located a small key hidden under a fountain pen. Within the drawer sat a leather-bound ledger detailing movements of cash entries that cross-referenced the suspicious spreadsheets on the laptop. Footsteps sounded in the corridor. Both women froze, hearts thudding. The steps grew louder, paused momentarily outside the door, then receded. They exhaled in unison, resuming their scramble. In a matter of minutes, they had enough evidence to devastate Leonard's empire if revealed publicly or in court. Just as Beatrice ejected the flash drive, her phone buzzed a silent alarm she had set to remind them that they'd been in the study too long. With no time to lose, they returned the files to their original places, relocked the drawer, and closed the laptop. Slipping out through the same back corridor, they parted ways, Dahlia returning to her room to feign rest, and Beatrice retreating to the hidden SUV. She planned to leave immediately. Every second she stayed increased the chances of being discovered. None of it was easy. Their nerves were shot, adrenaline had them trembling, and they had taken a monumental gamble that could unravel the moment Leonard noticed anything amiss. But as Beatrice drove down the mountain, the flash drive safely tucked inside her coat pocket, a sense of triumph warred with the haunting awareness that the real confrontation was yet to come. 2 days after the Snow Peak Haven heist, Leonard returned to the Harrington mansion, appearing victorious from his business retreat. He boasted about new deals in the works and seemed particularly pleased with himself, a smugness that Beatrice had grown to despise. She feigned mild interest, congratulating him without giving away any hint of the evidence burning a metaphorical hole in her possession. Behind the scenes, Beatrice and Dahlia felt a surge of confidence. They had incriminating files, receipts, and ledger copies that painted a devastating picture of Leonard's fraudulent dealings. Each woman also realized they needed to ensure this evidence was stored in multiple safe places. Beatrice locked a copy in a safety deposit box at a local bank under her maiden name, while Dahlia kept another in a secure cloud storage drive. They reasoned that if Leonard found out about one set, the other would remain hidden, ready to be revealed when the time was right. But gathering the evidence was only half the battle. The next step was deciding how and when to deploy it. Their priority was to protect themselves from Leonard's inevitable wrath. Beatrice's lawyer, Martina, advised caution. Pushing for an amicable separation might lull Leonard into complacency, opening the door for a more advantageous settlement. Simultaneously, they could quietly feed certain aspects of the financial misconduct evidence to the authorities, ensuring Leonard's potential indictment. For Dahlia, life became more complicated by the day. She couldn't simply vanish from Leonard's orbit without arousing suspicion. So she continued the charade, meeting him periodically under the guise of discussing marketing strategies. Each time he showered her with empty flattery, she forced herself to remember that justice was on its way. She no longer felt the old stirrings of affection or guilt. Instead, she saw him for what he truly was, a narcissistic manipulator who needed to be exposed. Tension mounted the day a private investigator showed up at Dahlia's apartment building, claiming to be working on behalf of an anonymous client. Dahlia peered at him through the security camera before deciding to ignore his visit. A pit of dread formed in her stomach, and she immediately warned Beatrice. "He might be testing to see if either of us is up to something," Dahlia said over the phone, her voice taut with anxiety. Beatrice's pulse quickened. "We have to stay vigilant. Don't let him rattle you. If we act guilty, he'll get suspicious." They agreed to tighten their communication protocols, again only speaking through burner phones, limiting face-to-face meetings to public places, and avoiding any direct references to the evidence in texts or emails. The closer they got to unmasking Leonard, the more precarious their situation felt. Around this time, Leonard planned a lavish anniversary party for him and Beatrice. Scheduled to take place at the family estate, a public spectacle to reaffirm his image of a perfect husband. The guest list included high-profile investors, socialites, and influential friends. Beatrice wanted to refuse outright, repulsed by the hypocrisy of it all. But Martina convinced her otherwise. "Attending this party without objection will make you seem unsuspecting. You'll gain insight into who's who in his circle. Trust me, it could be valuable." So Beatrice acquiesced. She prepared herself for a night of forced smiles and polite conversation. That evening, she emerged in an elegant midnight blue gown that accentuated her graceful figure. The staff scurried about, placing floral arrangements and ornate centerpieces in the grand ballroom. Soft violin music drifted through the corridors as champagne flutes were passed around on silver trays. From the moment the first guests arrived, Beatrice felt like an actress on a stage, reciting lines in a play she loathed. Leonard, wearing a tuxedo and his most charming grin, guided her around the room, introducing her to business associates and extolling her artistic brilliance. She could feel his hand on the small of her back, a gesture that once might have been intimate. Now it felt like a controlling grip. Dahlia arrived fashionably late, drawing curious glances. She wore a sleek, understated cocktail dress, her expression calm and collected. She knew exactly what she was doing, placing herself in Leonard's line of sight, making sure he believed she still craved his attention. Under the ambient glow of chandeliers, Dahlia caught Beatrice's eye. They exchanged the subtlest nod, a silent affirmation, "We're in this together." As the night wore on, the party's atmosphere felt increasingly surreal. Guests laughed and danced, oblivious to the undercurrent of tension. Leonard engaged in hushed conversations with potential investors in a corner of the ballroom. Meanwhile, Dahlia flitted between social circles, gleaning scraps of gossip. Beatrice, too, eavesdropped on pointed comments about Leonard's rumoured expansions and silent partners. Every now and then, she overheard a sideways glance or a whispered remark, an undercurrent of suspicion that Leonard's empire might not be as spotless as it seemed. For Beatrice, the highlight or low point came when Leonard took the microphone to toast their anniversary. He waxed poetic about how they'd grown together over the years, how she'd supported his dreams, and how he was the luckiest man alive. The applause felt like knives pricking her skin. She could practically hear the unspoken subtext. The audience believed in this charade, had come to witness the golden couple celebrate another year of wedded bliss. Yet, in the hushed corners of the room, Beatrice caught glimpses of snide smiles and half-raised eyebrows. She recognized jealousy, envy, or perhaps hidden knowledge swirling behind polished veneers. Maybe some in that crowd knew about the rumor mill that trailed Leonard. Perhaps others were too enamored by wealth to care. But she knew that soon, very soon, they would all learn the truth. When the clock struck midnight, staff began to clear empty champagne glasses, and the jubilant music started to wind down. Leonard appeared fatigued but satisfied, pulling Beatrice in for a staged embrace. With cameras flashing, Beatrice forced a dazzling smile, all the while thinking, "Just wait. Your illusions will crumble, and you won't see it coming." Exhausted, she retreated to their bedroom once the final guests left. As Leonard said his goodnights to the staff, Beatrice peeled off her party persona like a suffocating mask. She stood by the window, gazing at the moonlit lawn, her thoughts racing with anticipation and fear. Dahlia had texted her earlier in the evening some new information gleaned from overheard investor talk, but Beatrice was too drained to process it now. Tomorrow, she told herself, we tighten the noose a little more, and indeed the tides were turning. The evidence was amassed, the alliances made. Leonard had spent years weaving his web of lies. Now his wife and mistress were poised to rip it apart, strand by strand. Soon, his carefully constructed empire of deceit would face its greatest challenge yet, and no amount of money or charm would be enough to keep it from crumbling. Beatrice woke the next morning, feeling the weight of the world pressing down on her. The anniversary party had been a facade too excruciating to bear any longer. She recalled the hush of the crowd as Leonard poured his false adoration into a microphone. Even now, the memory made her stomach churn. From her art studio's window, she watched the sun pierce through the haze of early morning clouds. This sanctuary was the last place in the mansion that truly felt hers. Sketches, unfinished paintings, and easels cluttered the space, each representing a dream or emotion she could never fully articulate elsewhere. But she had no time for artistry this morning. Her mind was fixated on the next step in dismantling Leonard's illusions. She dialed Dahlia's burner phone. "It's time we move forward," Beatrice said the moment Dahlia picked up. "I agree," Dahlia replied, her voice steady. "I found out some new angles on those so-called partners. Seems they're not as innocent as they appear. They arranged to meet at a small lake house owned by a friend of Beatrice's family. Quiet, secluded, and far from Leonard's usual haunts. It was the perfect spot to strategize their next move. Dahlia arrived first, driving a nondescript sedan. She wore casual jeans and a jacket, her face devoid of the professional polish she maintained around Leonard. The air crackled with an almost electric tension when Beatrice joined her in the living room, where a faint smell of cedar wafted from the logs stacked by the fireplace. They spent hours reviewing the data on a laptop Dahlia had brought. The hush money entries, cross-referenced with ledger lines, outlined a complex but traceable web of offshore accounts. Transactions linking Leonard to shell corporations dotted the spreadsheets like landmines. Additionally, Dahlia relayed overheard conversations from the anniversary party, confirming that at least one investor, Jonathan Stone, seemed wary of Leonard's legal exposure. Stone had discreetly questioned Dahlia about whether Leonard's background was fully vetted. Beatrice tapped her foot anxiously. If one of his investors is already suspicious, it means Leonard's empire could collapse faster than we think. But we still need to be strategic about revealing this. Dahlia tilted her head, considering the ramifications. We can't just let him quietly fade away. He'll spin the narrative, pay people off. We need a knockout blow. At that moment, Beatrice's phone rang Martina, her lawyer. Beatrice answered, stepping onto the lake house porch for better reception. Martina's tone was brisk, yet excited. I've received word that a federal investigation is ramping up on some of the financial dealings linked to Leonard. This might be our window to share what we have, if we do it properly. You could secure immunity from any fallout and a strong legal standing in your divorce. Beatrice felt a rush of relief mingle with dread. Once the authorities got involved, there would be no turning back. The meltdown would be public, brutal, and irreversible. Still, she wanted Leonard to face consequences, not just for financial misdeeds, but also for his cruelty, manipulation, and personal betrayals. I'll bring the evidence, she told Martina. We'll do this by the book. After the call, she relayed the news to Dahlia. A tension-laced excitement coursed through both women. For Dahlia, it was a final chance to extricate herself from Leonard's shadowy world and salvage her career and reputation. For Beatrice, it was a necessary step to reclaim her life, end the marriage, and ensure Leonard's downfall was as complete as his lies had been. Yet they also recognized a potential danger. Leonard might catch wind of the investigation. If he did, he could move assets, threaten them, or orchestrate a smear campaign to discredit their evidence. They had to move quickly, meticulously. Their alliance solidified that day, sealed with the mutual understanding that they would not rest until Leonard was left with no escape. A chill wind swept across the lake as they packed up their materials. They parted with an unspoken vow: this is the calm before the storm. Back at the Harrington mansion, Beatrice maintained an air of practiced calm around Leonard, who appeared oblivious, engrossed in phone calls to his architects and business partners. I'm heading to the city for a few days, she told him during breakfast. There's an art expo, and I need new supplies. Leonard barely looked up from his phone. Sure, he mumbled. Enjoy. She could almost feel the tension in her chest unclench at his dismissive response. The distance gave her the freedom to finalize plans with Martina and Dahlia. Over the next few days, she delivered copies of the evidence to Martina's office, ensuring that the date stamps and spreadsheets were thoroughly reviewed. The lawyer's eyes widened at the scope of Leonard's wrongdoing. This is enough to bury him, Martina observed in a hushed tone. He could be facing multiple charges if the feds take it on. The final step was contacting an investigative journalist who had a reputation for exposing corporate corruption. Martina arranged a confidential meeting, explaining that while the journalist could break the story, they had to wait for the right moment after the legal framework was set in motion. The journalist, enthralled by the scandalous potential, agreed to keep everything off the record until Beatrice gave the green light. Unknown to Beatrice, Leonard's suspicion was growing. Despite his outward nonchalance, he had noticed a subtle change in Dahlia. Her phone calls were curt. Her once rapturous affection cooled. He also found the mansion's staff oddly tight-lipped, as if they were hiding something on her behalf. That sense of intangible shift prickled his senses. One evening, he confronted Dahlia via text. Leonard, you've been distant. Is there something you're not telling me? She carefully composed her response, feigning work stress. Dahlia, just swamped with a major campaign. Promise I'll make it up to you soon. Leonard stared at his phone, unconvinced. Over the years, He had honed a skill for reading the subtext of messages. Something felt off. Driven by paranoia, he hired the private investigator again, instructing him to tail Dahlia and see if she made any suspicious moves. "If she's meeting with anyone, I want to know who," Leonard insisted. The investigator, lured by generous pay, set about his job with zeal. The wheels were in motion for a climactic collision of truths and lies. Beatrice moved forward with legal motions that quietly signaled her intention to dissolve the marriage. Dahlia made arrangements to protect her professional reputation, even going so far as to gather email correspondences to prove she'd been manipulated by Leonard. Together, they forged a final plan. At the right moment, they would orchestrate a multi-pronged strike legal action, a coordinated media leak, and personal confrontation. Their greatest fear was that Leonard, in his final throes of desperation, might lash out violently or attempt to coerce them into silence. As cunning as he was, Dahlia suspected the looming investigation might drive him to extremes. Beatrice worried for her safety, and Martina advised her to consider a restraining order if things escalated. Through it all, the simmering bond between Beatrice and Dahlia deepened into something akin to sisterhood. They understood each other's wounds, regrets, and hopes in ways no one else could. Each had been scarred by Leonard's manipulations. Now, as the hours ticked down toward the moment they would tear his life apart, they clung to their collective resolve. Neither would allow him to continue his deception unchallenged. The mask was about to fall, and beneath it, Leonard's carefully constructed persona would be laid bare for the entire world to see. The night of reckoning arrived with a cold wind that rattled the windows of the Harrington estate. The tension was palpable in every corridor, every silent footstep echoing with unspoken resolve. Beatrice had requested that Leonard be home by 7 p.m. for an important announcement. She knew he couldn't resist an air of mystery, even if it came from his wife. Meanwhile, Dahlia, who was being tailed by Leonard's investigator, managed to slip away in a rented car to approach the estate's back entrance without detection. Martina and 2 associates waited discreetly in a parked SUV down the road, ready to file legal documents. The moment the confrontation concluded, the investigative journalist also stood by, ready to go public with the story at a moment's notice. Shortly after 7 p.m., Leonard strode through the front door. He wore an air of forced conviviality, as though anticipating some grand revelation that would further glorify his life. "Beatrice," he called out, shrugging off his coat, "what's this all about?" She emerged from the sitting room, dressed simply in black slacks and a white blouse. No makeup adorned her face, no jewelry sparkled at her wrists or ears. In this stark presentation, she felt anchored to her sense of purpose. "Come with me," she said, gesturing toward the study where sunlight had receded into the hush of dusk. Leonard frowned. "Is everything okay?" Beatrice said nothing, leading him into the room that once housed the black notebook revealing Dahlia's name. The moment they stepped in, Dahlia closed the door behind them. Leonard started, taking a step back. "Dahlia, what are you?" He glanced from one woman to the other, confusion morphing into suspicion and then alarm. Beatrice's heart pounded as she calmly hit play on a recording device. "We have some things we need to discuss," she said, her voice tightly controlled. Leonard's eyes flickered with anger. "A setup? What the hell is this?" "Precisely what it looks like," Dahlia replied, folding her arms. "We know about your affairs, plural, actually, and more importantly, we know about your shell companies, your fake transactions, and your hush money." For a moment, Leonard seemed disoriented, as if searching for a witty retort or a plausible lie. But the presence of both women standing in unity rattled him, his face contorted with indignation. "You think you can blackmail me?" he spat, his voice laced with contempt. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." Beatrice produced a folder from a nearby table. "Actually, we do. This is a small fraction of the evidence we've gathered: bank statements, offshore records, ledger entries, all traced back to you. Leonard blanched for the briefest second before trying to regain composure. "This will never hold up in court," he sneered. "Everything can be explained as legitimate business deals." Dahlia stepped forward, her eyes blazing. "We have recorded calls, screenshots of your private emails, and corroboration from some of your so-called investors who suspect your empire is built on fraudulent deals. The feds are already interested, Leonard. If they haven't knocked on your door yet, they will soon." Desperation flared in Leonard's gaze, overshadowed by fury. "You think you two can ruin me? I'll bury both of you in lawsuits. I'll drag you through the courts until you have nothing left." Beatrice's hands trembled, but her voice remained steady. "That won't happen. Our lawyer is outside, ready to file a divorce petition, citing your adultery and financial misconduct. I also have copies of all the incriminating data stored in multiple safe places. If anything happens to me or Dahlia, or if you try to muzzle us legally, the information goes public immediately." Leonard's control slipped further. He lunged toward Beatrice, but Dahlia stepped in front of him, anger radiating off her. "Don't you dare!" she hissed, her jaw clenched. He froze, unsettled by the fierce protectiveness between these two women he had once so easily manipulated. The silence that followed was electric. The illusions Leonard had woven for years cracked audibly in the dimly lit study. He glanced around as though seeking an escape route, but found none. "You'll be left with nothing," Beatrice said, her words slicing through the quiet. "All the prestige, the money, the admiration, it'll vanish. You did this to yourself." For a moment, Leonard's face twitched with something akin to regret, or perhaps the raw panic of a cornered predator. But he quickly replaced it with venom. "Fine," he spat. "Go ahead, do your worst. But don't think for a second I'll go down without a fight." Beatrice exchanged a somber look with Dahlia. They knew Leonard's threats weren't idle. This would be a battle, possibly a protracted legal war, but in that moment they also knew they held the upper hand. They had joined forces to pull the rug out from under him, methodically and thoroughly. "You've already lost," Dahlia said quietly, stepping aside to open the door. Leonard stood there, chest heaving with rage, eyes darting as though searching for a final gambit. Finding none, he stormed out of the study, ignoring Beatrice's attempts to hand him the folder of evidence. They heard the front door slam shut, the echo reverberating through the mansion's corridors like a final exclamation point on this confrontation. A trembling silence followed, and Beatrice found herself leaning against the study wall, trying to steady her breathing. Dahlia let out a long sigh, her hands shaking. They exchanged a glance of mutual relief and dread. The initial strike had landed, but the aftermath loomed large. Minutes later, Martina and her associates entered the mansion, quietly congratulating both women on their successful confrontation. "He's rattled," Martina observed. "We should file the divorce papers immediately. We've also informed federal investigators of the documents in our possession. This is a solid case." Dahlia peered through the study window, noticing Leonard's car roaring out of the driveway. She knew he would go on the offensive in some way, but for now, at least, they had seized control of the narrative. Beatrice turned to Dahlia, tears threatening to spill. "Thank you," she whispered. "I couldn't have done this alone." Dahlia squeezed her hand. "Nor could I. We had to stand together." And so, beneath the cloud-covered night sky, the first tumultuous wave of their plan crashed upon the fortress of Leonard's deceit. The final confrontation had taken place, but the true storm was just beginning. Legal battles, public scrutiny, and personal reckonings hovered on the horizon, waiting to strike. Yet, for the first time, both women felt a fragile hope glimmering through the darkness, the possibility of a future no longer shackled by Leonard Harrington's insidious manipulations. Thank you for joining us on this journey of betrayal, unity, and ultimate vindication. Beatrice and Dahlia's alliance showed us how far determination and courage can go when people refuse to be pawns in a manipulator's game. By exposing Leonard Harrington's lies and standing side by side, these two women claimed their freedom and delivered a powerful lesson. No matter how intricate the web of deceit, truth can still unravel it thread by thread. If you found this story compelling, please take a moment to hit the like button and share it with friends who love a good tale of drama and justice. And if you'd like more stories that explore the depths of human emotion and resilience, be sure to subscribe to this channel. Your support helps us bring you more gripping narratives. Until next time, stay strong, stay vigilant, and stay true to yourself.